Welcome to the Passion, Purpose, Power podcast. I'm your host, Ames. I'm a neurodivergent, fat, queer counsellor, coach and clinical supervisor, and I love stories. I love hearing your stories, I love sharing stories, and I love talking with people about their stories. In this podcast, I'm going to introduce you to interesting people with interesting stories to share about their passions, purpose, and power. If you love this podcast, please don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any amazing episodes, and come and find me on social media. I want to hear from you, and please share your stories with me. Tanya Nock is a passionate community advocate with a strong commitment to making the world a more equitable place. She believes in the value of inclusivity and actively fosters an environment where everyone's voice matters. In 2017, she gained Nelsonian of the Year award for her work as a creative arts facilitator, and later in the year, featured in the TV1 neighbourhood documentary celebrating those who bring colour and diversity to communities. Her recent TEDx talk discusses microfinance and her current work, which is Cultural Conversations, an art-based hub where migrants and former refugees lead the way. Her drive is to build relationships and bridge the gap between privileged and disadvantaged groups by providing opportunities to those who might otherwise be othered. So cool. Oh my, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, Tanya.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
And for anyone that doesn't know, you are in New Zealand, I'm in the UK, so it is currently, for me, your tomorrow morning where you are.
Yeah, that's right. Wednesday morning here. Yeah. And you're just about to go to bed.
I am. Yeah, but I mean, just so grateful for technology allowing us to be able to do this. So what I have so many questions, but let's start with passion. So obviously this is the Passion, Purpose, Power podcast. It seems like you're passionate about a lot of things, and that's great. Like, I don't think we're ever just passionate about one thing, but what comes to mind for you when you think about that thing that lights your fire, that gets you excited? What are you passionate about?
Well, I suppose it's evolved over the years because through working through the arts, but I suppose I'm at a place now as my passion is changing people's lives. And I suppose it's always been that, you know, when I was in education, but it's actually making and noticing that change. Yes.
Yeah, amazing. So in your TEDx talk, which everybody should go and listen to because it was amazing, you talk about your own history in terms of family having kind of becoming refugees from Uganda, and your experience of racism in the UK, in the classroom and growing up. How much of that has kind of become part of your story that has now influenced you wanting to make change, you know, for other people?
Oh, it's made a lot of it, because although it wasn't me personally that was a refugee, I was born in the UK, but I always felt, I didn't feel that I belonged there. And so I wasn't sure which community, which culture I fitted into, because I didn't feel when I went to India that they all thought I was an American tourist, and yet, but growing up in Wiltshire, I was the only brown face in the classroom or the orchestra, and yet I just always felt different and felt, I didn't really belong.
Yeah. And in your TED talk, you talked about how music was something that kind of united your family and has obviously become such a huge part of your life. How did music kind of play that role in uniting and you know, that family sort of time? And then I suppose going on, how did you kind of get into music yourself?
Yeah, well, I suppose music, from an early age, I thought is a language. So it was a way that you could communicate with people without talking and connect with people. So it didn't matter where you were in the world. And I found through travel and particularly singing, it was always a way to bring people together. And I still remember actually going to India and our family all just sitting around and singing and dancing. And it's, you know, science has proved that it's good for you. It's good, and it, you know, it actually can cheer you up and raise those endorphins. So I could see how music could cheer you up and make you happy.
Yeah, I love that. So it does something different, doesn't it? Music, and I suppose there's kind of music and then there's lyrics, and there's something about the storytelling of a song that hits different than just a spoken word. I've always been a huge fan of musicals, and I think that there's something in that around, I don't know, it's more moving. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, I'm more interested now because obviously after years of working with children and those privileged enough to afford lessons, and and then I wanted to bring music to the people. So I started with a samba group. So we managed to raise. You will hear in the talk how we raised money to get the instruments, and then at one point we had 90 people in it, and it wasn't just about the music. So it was a community, it was family. And then moving on to the Voice Collective, so many people are traumatized by being told they cannot sing. And even quite recently, 3 months ago, we did Spandau Ballet's Gold. And imagine a room, or a full room where you can't literally move, and people messaging me afterwards to say how euphoric it was to stand in a room and sing. And it had made huge changes and effects to their mood, and they were going to go home after work and they didn't feel that they could come, and they were in the mood, and they didn't regret it. So yeah, that brings joy to me, knowing that it has that effect on people. And I wanted to share it because I'd received it myself, so I wanted other people to feel it too.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of musical influences that sort of you remember being significant in your life at various points?
So it's quite funny. It's quite embarrassing, actually. I was a huge ABBA fan in the late
Well, that's not embarrassing.
And then it kind of went into the Joy Division and more of the cooler sort of stuff. But I did love all that pop and the Duran Durans and the 80s. So yeah, Tears for Fears, who were down the road, weren't they? Our local, I'm very proud that they were a Bath band.
I didn't know that.
You're younger than me, aren't you? You probably are. You probably weren't so much a Tears for Fears fan. So started with that, and then one huge change for me was that I went to Dartington College in Totnes. I went to that arts college, which was really progressive, and those were where the early WOMAD days were, down in St Hostel on the beach. And it was very much a co-creative festival. And for me, every day was like WOMAD for 3 years at that college.
Wow.
You had music from all over the world, and it just opened up my eyes to the world of music. And without all the protocols of silence and no clapping in between movements, and I just really enjoyed the gypsy side of where you could shout and scream, and Indian music where you actually just in the middle of it show your appreciation if there's something that hits the soul or something. So many different. I'm a massive fan of Stevie Wonder as well. Stevie Wonder was huge for me. And so many. So many.
It's amazing when we look back what kind of goes into building our sort of musical influences. I think it feels like it's more than that, but I didn't really kind of get into music particularly until I was it would have been kind of 90s for me. I was born in 78, so the 80s were around. I just wasn't very aware of music before the age of, I guess, 11, 12 and that kind of thing. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of with my son, who's 17, is he's got such a wide variety of music that he likes. He's equally at home with dubstep as he is with madness, and really enjoying seeing his kind of musical taste develop.
Yeah,
But
I've
it
enjoyed
does,
seeing Rick Astley come back at Glastonbury
yes,
last year with and the Smiths and
yeah,
that sort of era. Take and
yeah,
all the young people that knew all the words of the songs. That was incredible.
yeah.
So that kind of
Yes,
music, and even like listening to Massive Attack and More Chiba, all those Bristol Portishead bands,
yeah, yeah,
it doesn't seem dated now. Listening to that
yeah,
was a brilliant time. That was an
yeah,
incredible time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I don't know if you've seen it, but I was recording an episode with a local musician yesterday, and we were talking about this bumper sticker that I'd seen years ago that said music was better when ugly people were allowed to make it. And there's something that really resonates with that with me, because I just feel like the music, you know, great music you can find, but what you're presented with in kind of popular culture is
Yeah.
very it's not even just generic or anything like that. It's just it's usually very pretty people with perfect voices, and I kind of want something messier in my
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
music.
I'm with you too. Yes. I
Yeah,
remember I got told off once in the orchestra for um oh, I think I had my nose ring on or something, and just yeah, there was almost that that you must wear the white shirt and the black, and yeah, and I think I put my music on the floor one time, and yeah, it wasn't for me. Although I still love playing my violin, yeah, that whole orchestra scene was not for me.
yeah,
Mm.
interesting. How I don't know the story of how you kind of landed in New Zealand and how you settled there. Is there a story? And how?
Well, we did. So we went to visit. So my partner's family moved out, and we came out to visit when we were in our 20s, and it was so quiet. And we thought, what have they done? Where have they moved? To the end of the earth. And anyway, we ended up we were living in Devon, and we had our child, Rohan, and we brought him out for a holiday when he was 18 months to visit the family again. And we thought, actually, this is an amazing place to bring up children. So we decided to come for 18 months. And so we rented out our house in Devon, and came with just like 6 boxes. And after 18 months, we thought, no, let's stay here. Yeah. So we've been here ever since. And yeah, so we've got quite a few cousins and family over here, and I've got some from my dad's side on the North Island as well. So, but it does seem a long way
Yeah,
from, from Europe, England.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I try and listen to quite a lot of Maori voices, and I mean, Taika Waititi is obviously someone that is out there talking about the I guess the treatment of Indigenous people. How much does that play a part in the collective and in just sort of the work that you're doing over there?
Yeah, so it's ongoing work, and there's a lot of work to be done. And there's a lot of anger and protest around co-governance at the moment. So the government want to bring in co-governance, and that's recognising Te Treaty of Waitangi, and basically it hasn't been followed by the Crown. So there's it's brought a lot of people out of the woodwork. It's brought a lot of racism, white supremacy out, and
Right.
yeah. So at the moment, I'm just seeing myself as an ally and doing what I can to support the rights of Indigenous people.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I mean, as we've started talking about cultural conversations, tell us a little bit about the the birth of that, and I guess some of the impact that that's had on the community.
Yeah. So it started, I was still in a job. So I started it as more of a bit of a hobby. and we had a project for 10 days at Nelson Arts Festival, and that was back in 2019. And the idea of it came was really instead of newcomers moving to an area and being supported and learning ways of that culture, I thought, well, what can we learn from our newcomers? So it started in a tent, a beautiful Indian tent in the town, and we had 10 days of workshops and informal conversations and performances, and we asked the Sri Lankan, Bhutanese and Colombian community to be part of it. And it worked really, really well. I mean, we had different things from mask making to people coming with saris and how do you wear it in a Sri Lankan style, and then we had dance, and so I thought after that, actually there's only so much I can do within the system. So I made it a mission to set up my own charity, and that's what Cultural Conversations is. It's a charitable trust, and actually, we were very lucky we had the lockdowns, because that gave the time for us to have a team to actually apply to be a trust, because, you know, it takes a bit of time.
Yeah.
And we had a bit of support from Creative New Zealand for the first year. And so we have moved into empty shops. And I mean, I noticed back in the UK, there's quite a few empty shops too. So it's a lovely way for us to brighten up. We call the CBD is the Central Business District.
Okay.
So our first space that we went into had been empty for 3 years, and we went in for 6 months and it got leased.
Right.
And then second place, the same thing. It had been empty for 3 years. We went in 6 months, it got leased. We love our place at the moment. We've been in there, probably 18 months now. So, yeah, we brighten it up. We have various things going on. We have migrant and former refugee artists can display artwork. So we have exhibitions, and it's a bit like an art gallery. We have concerts. We have conversations. We have like live conversations like this. We may have food nights, and a regular night we have, as I've set up, Global Stitch Up, which is kind of it's a social enterprise without making a profit at the moment. Just in the early days of that. So the idea is, what can we learn from you? So that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
And preserving culture, because I'm seeing kids in schools who lose the parts of their craft and culture.
Powerful. And it's, I mean, is there a connection between you creating these spaces and then them getting leased? Is that
Yes.
Perhaps an unintended consequence of
well, yeah, you could say we shoot ourselves in the foot in a sense. But at the same time, you know, it's also quite refreshing moving on. At first, I would get a bit stressed, but actually working in the communities, it's like, it's no problem, we can just move on, you know. It's okay, don't worry. Yeah. So I've learned a lot myself. Yeah.
There's something sort of metaphorical about that as well, of I guess, you know, being forced to move on in a way, that making something from it, which I don't want that to sound like I'm dismissing or minimizing the impact of having to be, you know, not having a choice about moving on. But
yes, the idea with it all as well is that it is a safe space. So I was noticing that, you know, I go to quite a lot of events in town, and you go to these launches and you have all these things, and I look around. Anybody else that looks like me here? It's very white, it's very privileged, and I often think, you know, and I've watched some of the Muslim women walk through town, and they don't want to be seen. They're kind of, you know, quietly, and I'm thinking a lot of these people are invisible. A lot of people in the community I've asked, and they've never been to cafes or restaurants. It's literally work and home. So that's another passion of mine, is to give people something more than just work and home, and also integrating with each other.
Mm.
And that's been a really important thing. And we've done things like we've gone to a big concert opera in the park, and we've gone as a group of 50, because again, you can give out all the tickets you like, but people won't feel comfortable to go on their own to something they don't know. But if I say, come on, we'll have a picnic, let's all go together. So we've done a few things like that.
Yeah. I think that's really significant, because that was something that struck me about your TED talk, where you talked about first followers. And I think there's something about starting a project, but having that first follower that then gets the momentum going of other people being able to come along. How would you encourage people to be first followers, or because that can be quite anxiety inducing, being the first person to kind of go along to something, or be a participant in something?
Yeah, I'm glad you've reminded me of first followers, because I think it's, actually, I think I need to think about sustaining it as well, because you get it at the beginning, and then, it's keeping it going, or finding another first follower as well. So I think if you see something that somebody else is doing that you support, why not put your hand up to be a first follower? And I've seen it, actually. People do that. I don't know if you've seen the video of the field when they're dancing, because
I haven't, but I made a note to go and watch that, because I think that would be amazing.
It's Derek Sivers, and on his TED talk, and it's interesting. This first person that starts dancing in the field looks crazy, and then but then as soon as that second one, it sort of changes the whole dynamic. And I noticed that at the weekend with there was a messenger group that was quite a big group of people, and I was feeling like, oh, I don't want all these notifications. The event's over now. Shall I leave the group? But I was feeling like, oh no, if I leave the group, they're going to think I'm really, I'm not a very nice person or something. And then it took somebody else to leave the group, but then 10 people to leave the group.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, there you go. There's the first follower. Yeah.
Right. And thinking about it in that context of like the first follower might be the first leaver, and you talk about that as well, of actually maybe you need to step aside for someone else.
Yes.
And do you think there's something about, allyship, the something around the work for white people in anti-racism work that they hopefully should be doing, where they might need to be a first follower in order to I don't know, and not show the way. I don't want it to come across as a white savior thing, but if some the historical or the experience has been actually it's not a safe place for people of color, is there something around actually this could be a thing that white people could do to help?
Absolutely, yeah, and definitely stepping back to make room for other people. And I found myself in own situations like that, and there's that. So there's being an ally, and there's being a disruptor as well, and we're often called disruptors for what we do, because we'll actually call out situations, and particularly if it becomes tokenistic.
Right.
And there's an organization who might be using all the buzzwords, saying that they're doing all these things, but they're not doing it, then we call it out. But it's hard, because it's it's a small town, and it's also it's how much energy do you want to spend? That's the dilemma I have sometimes, is how much energy do I want to have fighting something compared to helping people? That's something I have to balance up in my life. Yes.
I think that I think that's a familiar burden that I hear people of color talking about, that that it takes a lot of energy to keep disrupting, arguing, making the cases. You need other people on your team to be able to do that as well.
Definitely, yes. Or the hardest thing is if you're around the table with an uncle or something, or it's a family member and they say something, is like, oh, do you speak up? But trying to speak up in not an emotional way,
right,
in a grown-up way.
And you talk a little bit about that, about in your talk, about still finding your voice, and I think particularly for women, there is something about that. I love that saying, something about speaking even when your voice shakes, and there is often emotion involved in what we are saying and doing. What are the sort of challenges that you're kind of facing at the minute? Or maybe a better question is kind of what are the current lessons that you're learning in life? Because I don't think that ever stops.
Oh gosh, I learned so many lessons. Nothing is permanent. That's a really important lesson that I always think. And I try and also think of the 4 agreements that the Mexican Toltec people lived by. So I always try and think, don't take it personally. Don't make assumptions. That's a huge lesson that I've learned. Don't assume. And then the first one is also impeccable with your words. So sometimes I remain silent, is knowing when to use your words. And always trying my best. But I suppose some of the challenges of it's I can be quite open and I can be a yes person, and I've had to bring more boundaries into my life and with particular people, because what happens when you're doing something that is successful, a lot of the funders now are saying that we won't fund you unless you are working with migrants and former refugees. And then suddenly I have a lot of organizations and people wanting to work with me. And, lots of cups of teas with people add up to hours. And when I'm project funded, I don't get that many operational. My operational funding is quite limited. So those are the challenges, actually saying, sorry, I'm not free for 3 weeks. Or that sort of thing.
And I suppose maybe adjacent to that is in our people pleasing or not kind of wanting to upset people, or which can be around when we're trying to say no or put in boundaries, is just we're so influenced by the fear of what other people think. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I think about that first person that got up and danced at that event, and I think I've internalized this idea that they don't care what people think about them. But I wonder if it is more they care, but they're just going to do it anyway. and so I don't know because I think it's such a big restriction on people, is what all people think, and it holds people back from really being creative and stepping out and doing exciting things. Any tips for either doing it and feeling the fear and doing it anyway, or caring less about what people think?
Well, I think say with the Voice Collective, the thing that you're doing it as a group. So yes, take some small steps, and join something with a bigger group so that you can, be supported and ask for help. I think that's the other thing. Is also, I'm feeling vulnerable. Would you come with me to this? Because I really want to go. I think it's always really important to communicate. And So when I've got a group singing, say, for instance, I'll say to everybody, because I think people won't naturally do it, well, some will naturally do it, but I'll sort of say, look, some people have been traumatized here. They've been told they can't sing at school. They've got here, they've come. And if you are feeling quite confident, would you be able to help somebody next to you? So I think it's that trying to encourage, like, I know that I'm not going to be able to change the world on my own, but it's that why water your neighbour's plant, you know, that kind of idea that, you know, we can all do it together. And if I think I finished my talk with that small acts. I always think of that, do you know the story of the starfish, when the boy's walking along the beach and he starts throwing all the starfish back in, and his dad says, why, there's so many, and you know, you won't make a difference. And he says, I will for this one. And I sort of think about that if, you know, that there's so many good people out there who want to do things. And that's the other thing. People often want to help, but don't know how to.
Yeah. There's something in there about maybe then if you are someone that does perhaps have a little more confidence, and I think, you know, we could have a conversation about where confidence comes from in terms of, you know, nature, nurture, and that sort of thing. But if you are someone that is able to kind of lay the groundwork, or kind of burst the bubble, or, you know, be able to say, yeah, you might be feeling scared, you might be, it invites vulnerability, and I think then great things come from that. So just before we have to end, we haven't necessarily specifically talked about purpose, but I think that's come across quite strongly in what you've been sort of talking about. But I really want to know, when you kind of, because you talk about empowering, and obviously I think so much of what you do is so powerful. Are you connected with kind of when you feel at your most powerful? That's kind of what I want to know.
Yeah, well, I'm actually going through menopause at the moment, so that's a hard question to answer, because I do feel different all month, you know. And it's, you know, hormonally I am fluctuating, but when I'm at my strongest is when I have spent a lot of time with myself. And I often will try and empower myself by speaking to my older, wiser self. So if I'm feeling a bit, you know, if I'm feeling a bit vulnerable, I'll kind of say, come on, Tanya, right, what do you need to do? And so, yeah, I often, and sometimes I might actually reach out to somebody, and I've got a few really, really solid people in my life that I can reach out to and get support. So I do find, that on my own is really helpful, but then also with others. And yeah, definitely sticking with, I find it safer for me to stick with the people I really trust, and to stay away from all that kind of white supremacy, stay away from the racism. And actually recently there was a protest with these white supremacists that were anti the co-governance, and I can't go anywhere near the place. Whereas if it was a transgender protest on rights, I'd be up there, you know. So I find or, you know, a Palestinian event or something, I would be there. Because it's not affecting me. Those people, even though they're bigots or whatever, or transphobes, homophobic, whatever, I find that I'm very powerful in that situation. But if it's something to do with colour, I need to stay away.
That's really interesting and thought-provoking. So you're kind of sort of saying that there's different elements that go into making you feel strong and powerful, and part of that is leaning on your own inner wisdom and taking time for yourself, and then resourcing yourself from trusted people, and then protecting your boundaries around, I know
Yes.
that is not going to be a space that is going to do anything good for me or make me feel powerful. So I'm not going.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then when I'm stronger, I can probably go into those spaces. But but then that can knock you back down again. So I have to be careful with that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be
think,
a politician. I wouldn't want to be in Parliament. I would find that too hard. Yeah, that's not for me.
No.
Kind of it's not for me.
Yeah. I think I'm always a little bit fascinated by the characters that end up with a lot of power within a system like governance and because they don't usually seem to be people that are wanting to share and grow and change. It's a more sort of know me first rather than the community first. Here anyway. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I'm very much grassroots. I like to be on the
Yeah.
ground with the people. I think on our first day at music college, because it was music, art and theatre, and there was a lot of people who thought they were super special. And I remember like the first day we all had to scrub the floor. And I learned a lot from that, actually.
Yeah.
And if anybody got too big for their boots, they were sent back to scrub the kitchen or so I think no one's greater or lesser. On the ground with the people, that's when I'm in my happy place.
Amazing. Anything else that you feel like a thing that you want people to know, or something that you want to say that we haven't covered so far?
No, I think that's it, really.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and giving me your time and energy and wisdom and education, and I'm so grateful to have heard your story and to hear a little bit of what about some amazing stuff happening over the other side of the world.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, and if you really want to help me out, I would love it if you could leave me a review and share my podcast with friends who you think would also enjoy it. This podcast was produced by Lexi at Digital Hero, and the music was created by Charlie at Walters Music Productions.